The language of deceit, notes and extracts, financial cycles and the payment of debts, waterways and bridges. We work so that we can be paid, so that we can buy things to make our work easier, so that we can then do more work. Mostly, we buy essentials, and every now and then, for the average person, maybe a luxury. It's amazing how much of what we have that we can simply live without. We seldom think too deeply about what we chase and why we chase it. We rarely ask ourselves the deeper questions about why we do what we do, or why we have what we have. The answer is always too painful and too pertinent. Industry and commerce and governments and societies all rely on two things: loans and the ability to persuade others that it is worthwhile to invest in a product, a service, or an enterprise. For this type of commerce to continue to function, it requires a population that is, to some extent, unsatisfied. The result is that the depressed and the unhappy will forever expend their wealth in search of the magical objective of personal progress or happiness, which will always be fleeting or remain just out of reach. Another necessity of sad reality for so many. Transformation is often necessary. In an age of change, you have to adapt to survive. As real as it seems, money is still just an idea, a concept, albeit an important one. Your approach to understanding it could be the simple difference between success and failure in life. Perhaps even between survival and subjugation. From indentured servitude to endless hours in the dark mines to long shifts in the local shop. We have always sold our energy and our ability to solve and assist and produce and destroy. In our quest for differences and progress, we have sought to exchange our practical abilities and our knowledge for other forms of wealth, at times emotional as much as physical. Knowing what is money is as abstract as defining what is love. Who creates money and where does it come from? Who issues credit and who decides the real value of anything? You would think that some of the basics would at least be covered in our comprehensive schooling systems or advanced academies. You would think there would be some regular basic study of the relationship between produce and production and profit. One has to wonder what really happens over the years of study in business classes or economics seminars or mathematics sessions. Perhaps the closest we get to understanding is a look at the simple strengths and weaknesses in evaluations. It's the avoidance of core issues and the focus on distractions, things of little overall matter, that are the reason for most of the world's problems. Thousands of years ago, in an age not more uncivilized than the present, the masters and the lords ruled like gods, and average people had to pay in some way for the privilege to live on the land. The fact that we have always had to pay for the opportunity to exist has always been the most fundamental, pressing issue underlying revolutions down throughout the ages. Running to just stand still is the greatest hurdle in human evolution. It's why the Israelites left Egypt and the Europeans fled to America, and why East Germans escaped to the West. The human escapade requires some level of adventure for it to be interesting. Luckily for historians, there has been an immeasurable number of tyrannies down throughout history, to the point where you might be mistaken for thinking the Bible was a recent publication. The quest to physically and mentally free ourselves is the continued pursuit of each successive generation. There is always freedom to be found in promises. But for those adventurous enough to explore new lands and fortunate enough to survive, there would always be a new opportunity. Oracles down throughout the ages tell the same story of the struggles of man. Always an odyssey that brings the hero right back to where he started. The inescapable truth is that in our quest for authority or power or domination, we find an excuse for all the slaveries we impose. The Egyptians, or perhaps the civilization from which they emerged, had the oldest known codified system of wealth share and transfer. In order to maintain some level of balance in society, a small level of opportunity to acquire wealth was redistributed throughout the land. Those who worked for the pharaoh were granted land on which they could build a home and grow crops to feed themselves and their family. This sharing of parcels removed from the ruling classes the responsibility to support and responsibly feed the populace. Service by the people was given in terms of labour in construction, or as a soldier in armies that invaded or protected the wealth of the rulers. Wealth was of course taxed to ensure that nobody rose above their station in life. The real gifts were reserved for the gods. Within this ancient society, everything was monitored. If occupations were carried out to an adequate standard, then water was allowed to flow to properties. This allowed the cultivation of crops and some level of personal security. This water brought life. And with the right knowledge, plants and flowers could be turned into medicine. The current, the flow of water, became the currency. It was the bringer of life and opportunity. The banks controlled the flow. This is why today we still discuss finance in terms of liquidity, solvency, and being above or below the waterline. These waterways or canals then provided transportation routes for the sale and exchange of goods. For those ambitious who worked hard enough and knew the right people or lined the right pockets, they could then expand their small holdings into farms that serviced not only their own needs, but also the needs of others. Markets appeared, and ports sprang up around these meeting points. This is also the origin of ownerships and docks and documents and births and certificates and registrations. These are all words with occult meanings that have survived even to the present day. Bridges were built and tolls were collected. Roads of a very simplistic form were constructed and guards were placed at the gates. Trade routes slowly emerged that allowed the exchange of more exotic goods. This was also the origin of new laws that were created to ensure that trade was to some extent fair, but also to ensure that most of the wealth remained in the hands of the few at the expense of the many. The game was on, but the people were busy, and as a result, a large number of them were actually happy. A pressure was lifted from the shoulders of authority. Man must have a purpose, whether it be to serve themselves or to serve others or to serve a god or gods. Without a mission, something is missing. Goods and products were, and still are, heavy and often difficult to transport. So around each market, local monotheistic systems of currencies appeared. These signed, trusted, paper-based bills were the progenitors of the currencies we use today. They were systems of credit that were portable and provided elements of practicality and reliability. With some level of certainty, claims could be traded rather than or on behalf of the goods. You no longer had to drive all your cattle to the market, and this opened up new avenues of wealth based on the promises and the projections. It is probably also worth noting that at this time, people were as much a commodity as anything else. All original lines of credit were based on objects of real value. They were based on tangible, verifiable reality. They were not based on myth, mystery, conjecture, or opinion. They were quantifiable and clearly defined. Furthermore, interest on all loans issued was seen as usury. It was forbidden in all reasonable religions. Only thieves turned money into money. That, however, was very long ago, and since then times have changed. We have been sold new ideas, or perhaps repackaged ones. Lending is now justified as risk, and as a result of this essential service, lenders are allowed to make a profit. It's a powerful argument, yet the risk, however, is really with the borrower and not the lender. The truth is that it is both a moral and practical dilemma, one that has yet to see a reasonable solution, and one that has remained unresolved for centuries. It's the very same issue for which Jesus lost his cool and overturned the tables in the marketplace, and somewhat rightly so. The language of deceit. Notes and extracts.